All right, so to get started, I'm going to introduce each one of our panelists, and they'll actually speak from the table there. They're going to do a sort of a 1-2 minute overview of what they do day to day, and then we've got some prepared questions that I'll ask, and then I'll start getting to some of the audience questions in the latter part of the discussion. You've already heard me introduce Dr. Nelson. I do want to sort of, as a quick add-on, I had a mentor many years ago tell me the best way to know if you gave a great speech is if someone asked you to come back and do it again. So I want to say that Dr. Nelson did a great speech, and I've already had a couple of people ask me, how do we get him back to Winston-Salem next year? So I won't reread his bio, but I do think we should give Dr. Nelson another big round of applause. Hosting a lot of different housing discussions, and I tell you, I've never heard it presented from that perspective, and we do want to get you back to Winston-Salem here very soon. Maybe Dr. Nelson, can you take a quick minute and just share what it is you do really day to day, and when you're not out here saving the world?
My day job, is this on?
Yep, there you go.
I teach courses in urban economics and real estate finance from a public sector perspective. I want to talk about that for a second. We don't have enough planners out there, I'm a planner, who understand real estate finance. And you can see the results on the front, unfortunately. So I teach my planning students how to think like a developer, what a rate of return is, what goes into rent, lease packages, sales packages, and so on and so forth. And what I have them do is calculate the difference between what the market will support and what a project actually returns that the public sector wants, like low-income housing or some commercial development. So if the market's returning here, but the developer needs this, we have a gap. How do we make up the gap? And I show my students the 36 different tools, and growing in number, that can be used to help make up that gap. And then they do a financial pro forma in an Excel worksheet to solve the problem. So I'm trying to teach the next generation of planners in this kind of way of thinking, because as I talked about earlier, the redevelopment part of the world is going to drive the economy, but there are too many things in the way. We have to find ways to make up that gap financing, and I think planners can help take the lead in that. I also run a research center, a Metropolitan Research Center. We have a full-time staff of 5. We support a dozen doctoral students in various contracts. Then I have a family at home who sees me once in a while. That's what I do. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Brent McKinney, Mr. McKinney received his Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from North Carolina State, my old alma mater, and his Master's in Civil Engineering from Purdue University. He began his career with the North Carolina Department of Transportation, where he worked as an urban traffic engineer, a transportation systems planner, and design review engineer. In 1979, Brent went to work for the city of Winston-Salem and was promoted to city traffic engineer in 1982 and became the city's first director of transportation in 1991. Mr. McKinney left the city to be the executive director of the Piedmont Authority for Regional Transportation in September 2001. Can we give a little round of applause for Mr. McKinney?
First, I want to say it is a real honor to be here and see all of you. For you to be here today for this conference, it's a tremendous honor to the council and the park, and we need to be doing more of these things. We need to keep the conversation going, and I may say that again before this conference ends. I did begin working for Park 11 years ago. I was the interim director for a couple of years before that while I was getting his legs under it. I remember leasing a copy machine. We got phones installed, and we had a little one-room office in the lower level of the airport. It's been kind of an interesting ride. Today we have 46 vehicles that's providing service in 8 counties. We have about $25 million of assets. We have $15 million of grant money in the pipeline. Last year, we took 13 million vehicle miles of travel off the roadway. We saved folks about $3 million in fuel. While that may seem impressive, we spend about $6 million every day for fuel in our region. So I envision this truck that leaves the Triad every day, and it has $6 million on it, and it doesn't even stop in North Carolina, for we have no refinery and no well, and that's $2.2 billion that we spend to move ourselves around every year. If we could come up with some way that we could meet our needs, keep some money in our region that we have coming in, I think we could provide some jobs. I think we could raise the quality of life. I think we could cut down this 53% that families spend on their income just on transportation and a place to live. Now, we should be spending about 15% of that on transportation. We spend 26 of it on housing, and what does that leave? 27 for transportation. We spend too much. We got to do better than that. Well, that's what I do. That's what I have done. I need to tell you that I was really pleased when Dr. Nelson said, "With Church 65, you keep living." 17 days, I'm going to join that group. Some of you may have also heard, because you came up and said nice things to me, congratulations. 36 days from now, I'm going to join the retirement community. I'm looking so forward to it. So thank you again for being here.
And we certainly, throughout the region, I think Mr. McKinney has made quite a mark here in the Piedmont Triad area. And I hope that I speak for all of you all when we say we truly appreciate his tenure and just the work and the time that he's given us to this community. If I can ask you to do so, can we give another big round of applause? It's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Alan Murdock, who's the Vice President of Economic and Workforce Development at Forsyth Technical Community College. I say it's my pleasure because I'm a foundation board member with Forsyth Tech and have grown to really appreciate the amazing work that this institution is doing in our community. Prior to joining Forsyth Technical Community College, Mr. Murdock worked as the Director of Economic Recruitment and Career Readiness at Central Piedmont Community College in Charlotte, North Carolina. Can you help me to welcome Mr. Murdock?
Well, thank you very much, and so blooming good. Please forgive me if I get up and start moving around. I spent 8 years in New Jersey, so I have a tendency to talk with my hands. And, so just deal with it, and I'll get us through it. I'm very fortunate to be here, I think, in Winston-Salem. I've only been here about 14 months, so I'm a newcomer to this region. But my past experiences with Charlotte, 80 miles down the road, so it's not that far off. Working with businesses that were either expanding locally or helping our chambers, our regional partnerships, our city, county government attract businesses to the region and expand jobs in that fashion. So today, hopefully, I'll be able to talk a little bit about what I've seen for the last 6 or 7 years with these companies that are expanding their workforce. Bethany, you were from Iowa. One of the things we probably talk about in the near future is the Career Readiness Certificate, which comes out of Iowa from called ACT. If you're not familiar with that, if you lived on the East Coast or grew up on the East Coast, you probably took the SAT. If you grew up on the left coast, you probably took the ACT. And the myth is that they made so much money off the ACT that they had to develop a new tool. So they developed a workplace tool. So not a college entrance exam, but a workplace exam. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future, just to kind of set things up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murdock, and you can certainly another round of applause for Mr. Alan Murdock. I also want to make sure that I mention Dr. Gary Green, who's the president at Forsyth Technical Community College, was scheduled to be here with us today. Unfortunately, due to a family emergency, he was not able to be here. He certainly passes on his regrets for not being able to join us. But I would also ask you all to keep him and his family in your prayers as well. So, all right, so let's kick into our discussion. And to really get us going here, I want to go back to Dr. Nelson's presentation. Again, I thought it was just tremendous. And in his presentation, he talks about some of the demographic changes that could be coming to our country and obviously to our region as a whole. So my first question to our esteemed group here is, how can we ensure that housing, employment, and transportation options keep pace and expand appropriately considering some of the demographic changes that are coming to this region? And any one of you all that want to take on that first, maybe Dr. Nelson might be prepared to respond.
I'd like an easier question.
Okay.
That is a great question. First of all, my view is that we need to expand transportation options, creating more connectivity between land uses. Now we have, on our faculty, we have Lee Ewing, who's a world-class mathematician and transportation statistician. What he's figured out is that it is not necessarily density that reduces BMT, bill miles traveled, and increases mobility choices, but it's the integration of land uses. And as a matter of fact, the density piece of this huge formula is only about a quarter of the total change in BMT with respect to connecting land uses. So, put simply, if you have residential areas amidst office areas with shopping opportunities and maybe healthcare opportunities, all within maybe a half a mile to a mile of each other, more people will walk or bike to them, and more transit options become available, bus rapid transit, regular bus, whatever it is, and BMT plummets. And as BMT plummets, you actually have savings in the economy that are reinvested in the economy. We also know from other work we're doing that when you reduce DMT, by integrating the land uses, not necessarily through density, but by integration of the land uses, you reduce unemployment, you increase incomes, you make the local fiscal base more resilient to the downturn that we've seen, and you create more economic exchange, which means even more jobs. These are things that you can do over the next 30 years if you begin thinking about re-engineering, replanning your suburban nodes, because that's where most of the people live in this area, are suburban areas. But think ahead about interconnected land uses at moderate densities, 10 units to the acre, maybe that's the high end, but mixing in the retail and the office and integrating them with pathways and bikeways and maybe some levels of transit. You can get there from here.
And Mr. McKinney, would you like to maybe comment on that, maybe just more from a transportation perspective? Again, it seems like demographics are really driving the need to adapt our transportation modes.
There's another incentive for folks to use public transportation, which results in our need to provide more choices, and that is the economy, saving money. One thing that Americans love to do is we like to save money. And if we can provide a transportation choice where people can save money, it's a good investment. It's also a good investment to have public transportation for those who do not use public transportation. Would you rather drive to work behind 30 vehicles or a bus with 30 people on it? I think most of us would choose the one bus. It's a win-win for all of us, and that's part of the story that has to be told. So there's always going to be some pushback. There's always going to be some hurdles to overcome. And one of the pushbacks that you'll hear is, I don't use public transportation, I don't need it. But when you look at the savings and the reinvestment of those funds in the community, when you look at reduced consumption of foreign fuel, which all of our candidates are talking about today, it's good for the country, but it's also good for our local neighborhoods, and it filters right down to the family. So increased investments, for whatever the reason might be, is a good thing. But the number one thing that really gets people's attention is the fact that they can save money from using public transportation. It's something that we need to look at really seriously and see if we can't provide more of that. Because in our region, we're pretty much a single mode transportation. The other thing that PART has done, and we have, there's no question about this, we had to find out if you build it, will they come? Because that's part of the process. We live in an area where we've never really relied very much on public transportation, and so the big question was at the federal and state levels, if we invest, will they come? Folks, at one time, before we had to cut back due to funding, we had 9 buses that left Mount Airy every morning with people standing up on some of those first buses at 5:40 in the morning. They will use public transportation if we provide it for them.
And Mr. McKinney, I mean, again, sort of keeping with that same vein of public transportation, that there seems to be, especially in southern communities, seems to be this psychology of a certain stigma associated with public transportation. And in order to get more people to really participate in the system, you almost have to overcome that. Are you able to comment on that very quickly? Or?
You have to provide a good service. We do have that stigma to overcome. Public transportation is not for us who live in the South. It's a very tall hurdle that we've had to overcome. But the way you do it is you provide a good vehicle, a clean vehicle, an affordable vehicle, but that's not number one. The number one thing that folks want out of public transportation, get me there on time. If that bus doesn't get there, it ruins their day. And all of a sudden, it's not the traffic's fault, it's not my fault, it's the driver's fault. So the driver needs to know all the alternative routes, all the back roads, do your very best at all time. If you can do your very best and get up there on time, you can overcome those hurdles. We get a lot of compliments about the vehicle, the on-time schedule, and so it's not been easy. We just need to continue doing more and more of that.
Very good. I want to, this morning we've been talking a lot about regionalism, right? And I'm almost sort of curious, and again, this might be a question for you, Mr. McKinney. How does our region currently measure up in terms of regional cooperation? And I guess as a tag along to that, how do you really measure that? What are the indicators that you're looking at?
On the surface, it's great. Good attendance, great conversations, good participation, good attendance. We have 23 board members on the park board. They come from 10 counties. They come in all shapes and sizes and different philosophies and have really, really good meetings. They all go home and they come from home and when they get back home, they all have a different vision. It's a local vision. The problem that we still have is meshing those visions into a regional vision. There's a lot of competition between our communities here, and that's what we need to have that bigger, higher level, that 50,000-foot vision on the triad. Until we get that, we're going to be disadvantaged when it comes to competition in a lot of areas.
And as I was properly corrected by Paul here, the region is all 12 counties and not just Alamance, Guilford, and Forsyth here in the urban core, the urban corridor. And I would also add that all of you in this room can do something about promoting the regional vision by holding your elected officials accountable, by asking those tough questions about regionalism, and really trying to drive elected officials to think more regionally. I mean, again, everyone in this room can certainly play a very active role in that. Sort of shifting the discussion away from regionalism into more so education and jobs. We all in this room understand that education and skills development creates options, which certainly leads to higher employment. And this could be a question probably more so for Mr. McKinney or Mr. Murdock. Have we been making the necessary investments into our education systems over the years?
Mr. Nelson, I would like an easier question.
One that doesn't get you in trouble, right?
Exactly. Well, I would say, I had mentioned earlier, we talked a little about the career entrance exams from ACT. We are going to see more and more of those types of exams to get into the workforce. Now, have we invested in education? I think we have quite a bit. We could always use more. When we look at a new economy, when I'm talking about the new jobs that are coming, on a scale, the low-end jobs, we know how to get into those jobs. It's going to be, can you pass the drug test? At the top end, we know how to get into those jobs. That path is already prescribed. It's going to be education, undergrad here, an MBA here, or something along those lines. We start talking about those middle level jobs, the working America, the middle class, or whatever you want to call that group. mission is going to be a little bit different. And that's where I think we see some investments that need to come into community colleges, or community college, I want to speak to that level, but also to K-12 as well as the universities. One of the things we see is that companies are really looking for a skilled worker right off the bat. And the truth of the matter is, whether you like to hear this or not, we are not all creative people. Whether it's the high school we went to, the college we went to, there are some disparities. I think we saw this in Texas, had a great plan that everyone that graduated in the top 5% of their class was automatically enrolled at the University of Texas. Well, the issue with that was, if your senior graduating class had 1,000 people in it, that top 5% was the top 5%. If your graduating class had 35 people in it, well, there were some issues there. Those 35 of those people from that smaller school had really struggled at the University of Texas. And not to say that they didn't work hard, it's just things are just a little different. The economies of scale are different. What we're seeing are manufacturers in particular not only looking for a good work ethic, but also skills attainment. And typically skills attainment from a third-party credential. What we're seeing now is that it's not enough to have a high school diploma or even community college credits or an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree. You need to go somewhere else that has nothing to do with your school and be certified. So we're looking at things like a career readiness certificate. It doesn't care where you went to school or what your education level is. Here's the test. Everyone takes the same test. And here's where you fall. The same thing with the NIMS certification, National Institute of Metalworking. Those are tests that not only measure your critical thinking skills, but they're actual physical tests. You have to get on a machine, you have to do something, build something. Those are the entrance requirements to some of the new jobs. And we can say the same thing about healthcare as well. Like I said, I work in a community college, I can go on for 20 minutes, so feel free to cut me off.
No, you're okay.
I used to be in sales, but I would say for some of these middle skills jobs, I want to talk about manufacturing, just because I think it's been prevalent in the news in the last 24 months with places like Siemens and Caterpillar and Hitachi. Those are the things they're looking for their new workforce. When I got my first job, and for somebody that can't remember 1984, or think about I'm looking at Bethany right now. Okay. In 1984, I got my first job. I was 13 years old, and the requirement for me to get that job was my dad saying, Alan's a hard worker. And I ended up working for Stone Mason, building a mall in upstate New Jersey for the summer. I'm not sure I know that's not enough to get into the pipeline at this point. One of the companies that helped recruit in Charlotte, just to get an interview, you had to have a AWS certification, American Welding Society certification. Not only did you have to have a certification, but a top level certification. That wasn't to get the job, that was to get in the front door. So when we talk about investing in community colleges or education in general, yeah, we do need to invest more in the infrastructure, but individuals need to take some responsibility here as well, and they need to invest in themselves. The jobs of the future require more of us, more skills, more talent, more education, if we want to move forward into the workforce or be promoted in the workforce. And with that, I'll leave it alone.
Well, and sort of keeping with you for a moment, Mr. Murdock, I mean, you sort of talked about the jobs of the future requiring a greater set of skills. It seems like about 20 years ago, we really started to demonize our community colleges. And, if you went to a community college, you must be a criminal, or you were a slacker, or you were lazy because you didn't go to Chapel Hill or Wake Forest. But it almost seems like we've got this dynamic in our labor pool that's starting to happen where we don't have a lot of skilled labor. So if you need to call a plumber at your house, you may have fewer choices to call. Or if you need to get the HVAC fixed at your house, or going back to your Caterpillar example, one of the things that I know Caterpillar needed was machinists. And they really relied on Forsyth Tech and the jobs training program that you all created to be able to supply those jobs. My question is this. Would greater capacity in the community colleges, would that drive higher corporate growth and more relocations to the Triad, which would obviously improve our jobs market?
Well, the easy answer is yes, not because you're on our foundation. But the answer is yes, and it's a piece of the puzzle. what everyone is talking about is the same, so that all goes into the mix, and we're looking at creating new jobs, bringing new companies in. What I like to tell companies when they come, because I love to compete, I know it's probably not a nice thing for me to stay here, but I'm happy to take on Virginia and South Carolina any day of the week. When I speak to those company executives, I tell them we have as a region, but education is the fundamental to your success. I don't care what incentives you receive, but at some point they're going to expire or be utilized. But 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years from now, you're still going to need someone to operate your machines, answer your phone, and balance your books. And that's where we can make a difference in traffic.
Thank you. This next question is going to be for Mr. McKinney. You know, one of the things that's been absent from this morning as we've been sort of talking and discussing is the use or the leverage of more public-private partnerships. So, for example, we know in certain communities across the country, they are using private developers to build schools and libraries and other facilities, and then school systems and municipalities are leasing back these facilities. What are some ways that we can use more public-private partnerships to expand our transportation infrastructure?
Councilman, let me back up to the last question. I want
Sure.
to provide a comment and combine the two.
Sure.
Public transportation has a philosophy. I want you to know what our philosophy is. We don't just put the bus out there and hope people get on it. Thank you. The PART's philosophy is that we connect colleges and hospitals. There's a reason for that. They have multiple markets, multiple needs, large employees. Wake Forest Baptist Medical Center is the largest employment center in the entire region. So we connect that on all of our routes. Look at our schedules. We pick up, we bring to the cities, we rely on the cities to distribute the passengers inside their municipal boundaries, Winston, Greensboro, and High Point. But when we pick up and come into those areas, we go to the hospitals, we serve regional, we serve Baptist, we serve Cone and Long, and Women's Hospital in Greensboro, and we go straight to UNCG when we come into town. They have employees, they have students, they have patients, and they have visitors. And all of those have special needs for public transportation. Last fall, I had the privilege, or honor really, of visiting with every college president in the region. I did that on purpose, to talk to them about their transportation needs and talk to them about our philosophy. And what I heard at the community colleges, when we're talking about capacity, I heard the same story from everyone. It was an amazing script. And that is that funds are being cut, students' admissions is up because of people want to be retrained, going to college now, looking to prepare themselves for another job. Parking lots are overcrowded. And we're having difficulty with students getting to our classes on time. I heard it over and over and over. Capacity is a big problem at our community colleges and everything. Think about Davidson Community College. They now have purchased land on the other side of 85. It's difficult for the students to get across the road. It's difficult for Surrey County students to get to their campus in Yadkinville. It's difficult for people in Randolph to get to the campus there. Transportation needs. There's something else that's happening in our education system. When you go to the private colleges, Wake Forest, Guilford College, at that level, with their private base of funding, families are having difficulty in affording college at private schools these days. So those students are likely to be sent to college, to our state-supported schools. UNCG, Winston State, A&T. The families that have traditionally sent their students to those schools are now sending them to the community college. So you're having this downward effect that the economy is having on families and incomes, and it's showing up on a large scale at that level. Now I want to talk about what can private organizations do. They have stepped up. I could go back to the mid-'80s when Reynolds and Baptist Hospital had the largest van programs in the state. And Winston-Salem benefited from that when we made them public and took them over. And for years, we had the largest public transportation van pool program in the region. And today, PART has combined the one in High Point, the municipal in Greensboro. And those van pool programs started in the private sector. The hospitals are still providing transportation between the different campuses here in Winston-Salem. UNCG is providing transportation between their parking lots over on Lee Street. The bank here in Winston-Salem funded the downtown shuttles and a particular route that served the facility out on 5th Street for a long time. And last year, due to our funding shortage, we went to Baptist Hospital, Forsyth Hospital, and asked for contributions. They gave us exactly what we asked for. So they're very willing to help out. They realize the benefits of getting their people here on time. By the way, they sell pre-tax tickets at many of our locations to use public transportation today. They are willing, and so there is an avenue there for us to do that.
And Mr. McKinney, I want you to take a swing at this, and this is my last prepared question, and maybe if you can limit your response on it so we can get to some of the audience questions. Here in our state, we rely on Raleigh to fund transportation projects, and we do that through what they call the transportation equity formula, which a lot of times, at least for urban communities, it's not so equitable. A lot of these dollars end up going to rural communities down east. Mr. McKinney, is it time for us to look at a regional mechanism for funding transportation projects? And then just very briefly, if we were to do so, what would that look like?
It is beyond time to look at that equity formula. It was put in 1989 by the General Assembly so there would be an equitable distribution of funds across the state. The formula has 3 factors in it. First of all, let's take the money and divide it into 7 pots. That has nothing to do with transportation. But let's divide it into 7 pots based upon a combination of divisions within DOT. Our pot is a combination of Division 7, Division 9. We get 1/7 of the monies based on that particular factor. The second factor is based on population. Well, since we already have predetermined boundaries, we already have predetermined population. It has nothing to do with transportation. The first pot down east has 20 counties. Ours has 10 counties in it. It has nothing to do with transportation. The third one is, let's look into the transportation program. Let's look at the projects that are in there and the cost, and then let's allocate 1/3 of the money based on the factor that we want to complete all of these projects on time or at the same time. It has nothing to do with transportation. None of the factors that are in the equity formula for distributed funds in the state of North Carolina looks at travel, looks at congestion, looks at jobs or travel or anything. It is way past time for us to look at using our dollars to meet our transportation needs. Is that pretty emphatic?
That is terrific, and I knew you would give that response. And I would be remiss if I didn't pick on this gentleman, but we're going to be counting on you, Mr. Haynes, when you get to Raleigh to reform that formula and get us some dollars back here. All right, so my prepared questions are complete. We're going to move into some of your questions. Again, I apologize. We won't be able, you guys gave a nice stack of questions here. We won't be able to get to all of them, but we'll try to get as many as we can, and I think our panelists will make themselves available afterwards. My first question is for Dr. Nelson. Again, I loved your presentation. At our firm, we finance a lot of apartments, so I really loved your presentation because that means we're going to be busy for the next couple of decades. But the question is, we just learned here in Piedmont Triad that 75% of our citizens live in rural areas, small towns, suburbs, rural counties. Given some of the trends that you presented, how do you believe this may change over the next 30 to 40 years? And I guess the question means, do you see some of these people moving out of the rural areas and coming into urban areas? And what would that change potentially look like?
I want some easy questions.
Yes. I gave you time to rest before we got back to you.
Kind of all of the above. I'm going to touch a little bit on the aging population. There's this romantic notion that we should be able to age in place. And, that's nice. But sometimes as we age in place, we need some help. We can't take care of the yard, we can't take care of the house. So where does the help come from? And if we're in remote rural areas, it's difficult to have the help come out to us to take care of our house and our yard, or even us. So that's going to be an emerging challenge all across the U.S. is how do we allow, facilitate the elderly and aging in place, especially in rural areas. And the numbers are huge. So then we have in many suburban areas a situation where a lot of the retirees coming up, not so much now, but in 10, 15 years, basically next decade, they're going to be wanting to sell their home. But there may not be anybody available to buy their home. This will be in the urban areas, suburban fringe areas. You might be okay here because you are growing, but I'm thinking upstate New York, the Midwest, parts of Iowa, although actually I was doing fine, come to think of it. So in those cases, unfortunately, seniors will be aging in place not voluntarily, but involuntarily, because they can't move out of their home. So I think that I have not thought through the implications of the aging population and the changing housing market characteristics to figure out what we have to do now to anticipate the future needs. I worry that the future needs will be very expensive to accommodate, and we're not going to have the money to do these, to meet these needs. So what can we do now? I don't know. I'm an academic. I should have the answer, but I don't.
He'll have the answer when he comes back next year. That's good. Make sure you're hanging on there. And I want to stick with you, Dr. Nelson. Next question. This is a little easier. The next question is the numbers that you display for Greensboro and Winston MSAs look quite different. Why was that?
You know, I don't know. My numbers are based on remote sensing, if you will. In my office, I look at the numbers and I report the numbers. So I'll be honest, I don't know on the ground what's happening here, but I suspect that Winston-Salem is a more nimble job creator, attracting maybe a younger population with more jobs, a wider variety of jobs that may not exactly be available in Greensboro. But that's as far as I can take it. Now, actually, Greensboro, I think, is actually poised to become a job generator with its colleges and universities there, and tremendous infrastructure and a large population base. But I don't really know the area that well to give you a good answer. Sorry.
Again, come back next year. He's going to work on that one. All right. That's good. That's really good. Mr. McKinney, you know, if you hadn't noticed, we've got an election going on this year. Did you notice that? Okay. All right. This next question is somewhat political. We live in a 50-50 nation, about 50% Democrat, 50% Republican. Regional planning is typically viewed as a Democrat program. How do we change the psychology behind that?
We need to show the benefits of planning. We show the benefits of addressing the need for transportation and housing. We know that there's less impact on the family whenever there's a shorter commute versus a larger commute. That comes from good planning. We know that there are benefits whenever people can find the type of home that they're looking for in the location where they need it. We have to tell our story. Events like we're having here today pays tremendous benefits to the community. Whenever we get together, we share ideas, and we leave and go tell the story. If we do not do that, then it's like having a set of plans for something to live on the shelf. I think that's what we can do, is to continue to tell the story and show the benefits of planning. Without them, we end up with very inefficient systems. Oftentimes we miss the mark, and we get better use of our limited resources, and that's the story that we have to continue to tell over and over. And it will play. Whenever those folks who want to build in the more rural area so that they can meet the vision of a Father Knows Best, and maybe there's one or two of you out there that remember that program when Robert Young would drive up in the driveway in station wagon. And whenever Jane Wyman would meet him at the door, high heels and an apron, okay, the dog would bring in the paper. That that kind of appeals to you. For our generation, we wanted a large lot with a white picket fence, and so we built out there. Today, we have to connect the transportation part. Whenever they realize that there's about $8,000 per vehicle is the cost of living out there, that addresses planning. We've got to start telling the need and telling the story. It'll sell.
And I believe Dr. Nelson wanted to add a comment.
I hope I get this right because I don't want to misstate his positions. The chairman of the board of the Utah Transit Authority is a conservative Republican legislator. And I think he's one of the 2 or 3 that run what's called every Saturday morning red meat radio. Think about that. He is I don't want to be on his program, or maybe I will one day. But the point is that he is an advocate of transit because he believes it provides choices. One of the tenets of a conservative philosophy, I think, having been in the Republican Party, and still favor a lot of its ideas, is choice. A lot of people have no alternative to the automobile. They can't drive, they're too old, they're too young, they're injured or handicapped. They need choices, but other people need choices too. So that's one part. Another part is he views transit planning, when done right, correctly, as an economic development tool, connecting firms to, as you were doing, connecting firms to each other along corridors or between nodes. But it's not going to solve the transportation problem. You know, at best, in our part of the world, in Salt Lake Valley, maybe we'll get 10% ridership on the transit systems within 30 years. It's about 5% now. But that would be a movement in the right direction because that creates opportunities for nodal development, corridor development, and that actually stimulates economic development along those corridors. So I don't want to misstate or not say properly his views, but I suspect that those are what his objectives are as chairman of the board of the Utah Transit Authority.
Thank you. I've got 2 more questions. This question is going to go to Mr. Murdock. We oftentimes talk a lot about getting jobs here in our urban communities. We almost sort of assume that our rural communities are going to be bedroom communities to these urban areas. How do we sort of really get jobs out to all communities and make sure that the rural counties don't get left in the hustle and bustle there?
So much for the easy questions. Huh?
Yeah. Got a smart group out here that
Yeah,
want to know.
I know. Sure we're on here. Well, to be honest with you, we're looking at, especially these rural communities that have a lot of history, have a lot of family businesses. How do we grow the entrepreneurial spirit in those areas? Currently, we're looking for a new small business center director for that Forsyth Tech, in part to be working with Stokes County and see what we can do with what we have there, recruit more companies to that area. One of the things I thought was interesting, Asheville, North Carolina, I have a bio lab up there, and I just picked it up a couple months ago, so I'm up there and see what they were doing, and that's what's going on up here in Asheville, besides Hudson, what's going on. And it's interesting that they've got this new market up there that I don't think that we might be able to replicate here. They're pulling a lot of rules because of their agricultural background. That barley whatever they're growing up there and testing up there. I don't see that being far-fetched in north of here, so County or Surrey is very active. We'd love to have more greenhouses around town, that are entrepreneurial in aspects. So I think that's it. With a lot of those places, it can be difficult to land a huge company mass of 1,000 employees or so. But if you look at our growth, it's not going to be IBMs of the world that are adding thousands of jobs. It's going to be small businesses, less than, say, 100 folks that are adding 10 jobs here, 20 jobs here, 30 jobs here, that all adds up. So making sure that small businesses have a seat at the table is going to be important.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Murdock. And our last question is, what alternative fuels energy efforts are being developed regional energy independence. And I'm actually going to take this question myself. In addition to my role with Wharton Gladden and my role with Forsyth Tech, which I'm very proud of, I was recently appointed the chairman of the North Carolina Energy Forum. North Carolina, along with 27 other states, are participating in what we know now as a Vote for Energy campaign. And we believe through a diversified, broad set of energy production methods, we can become energy independent in our country. So I really want to encourage all of you all, and what we're promoting is what we call an all-of-the-above energy strategy. We certainly need to be looking at wind, solar, renewable technologies, but the reality is that currently, right now, 62% of our baseload energy demand is met through fossil fuels. It's met through coal, natural gas, and oil. And so we're not going to be able to completely get off these sources. And so we need to have a really diversified, broad approach to how we approach energy production in this country. Right now, we have a 500,000 jobs deficit in the state of North Carolina. We know right now if we expanded offshore oil exploration as well as natural gas development, we could create 250,000 jobs in the state of North Carolina. So again, I won't harp on the Energy Forum too much, but I would encourage all of you all, if you can write this down, go to ncenergyforum.com, ncenergyforum.com. There are a lot of myths out there about energy production, and we've created this website to really combat some of the myths, and would love for you to go there. We've had over 30,000 people take the pledge to vote for energy. So again, go check out the website. I'm up here up front. I do have a little small card here about the North Carolina Energy Forum, and I certainly would love and enjoy talking to you more about the work that we're doing, not only in the state of North Carolina, but across the entire country. Again, this has been a great discussion. Can we give a big round of applause for all